Morning. First off, I would like to thank ITS Latin America for inviting me to this important discussion and to speak on this important topic. To how we all could, as professionals, we could rethink urban mobility planning in the era of smart mobility. You know, it is an important topic. All of us, as professionals, are caught up in these buzzwords, in these technological transformations, new things coming every day. So seldom we step what actually needed to get to that these new embrace these new challenges of smart mobility. So I'm going to challenges from developing countries' perspective. Look, from the regional side, the developed countries who have necessary infrastructure um, is and comes to countries, they have unique set of challenges. So my the core, the crux of my discussion and talk today their challenges. So with this in mind, let's move on to what is smart. We keep talking about smart mobility in our professional life, but what is smart? Towards smart or sensible. We must weigh in what is necessary for your projects, for your region. And from that perspective, we have to understand that smart does not necessarily reflect on wisdom. And at the same time, what weight do the human emotions carry for your region? Do more robotic system where everything is automated. You have all the automated systems elaborate on human emotions, or you want a system which is sustainable, which cares for very much necessary human emotions. Could we make our future sensitive? Equation is that what exactly do we want for our region, and how smart is sensible enough. So with that, I'm going what conventional urban mobility planning process includes. This will basically give us a sort of primer to go to next level of and what we are facing and how to tackle them. So let's look into the conventional urban mobility planning process. When it comes to the process relies on perceived sustainable urban mobility plans. And this is true, generally true in urban mobility organizations around the world in developing countries. Shift to more support modes given they are available. In many cases, these modes are not available, and generally in developing countries, either it's auto head, but yet again, it's one of the coefficients in this equation of smart urban mobility, conventional urban mobility. Let's look at, then we can look at integration and balance. Is it there? These urban plans at many of these public organizations, which are expected to conduct these planning tasks for these. If the balance is there among all modes, is there accessibility to the modes? Are the users comfortable with this, with the mix of men? These modes naturally vary by region, as in case of America, which is a developed country. For the most part, the country is auto heavy, and public And if we look, it's public transport heavy. So that's why we must keep in mind what region we have, and based on that, these decisions are made in those regions in conventional modeling, conventional urban. Then land use types and forms. Again, they are integral part of every urban mobility planning process, regardless of the region. So let's look at the dilemma that these conventional urban mobility practices are facing. The first one is outdated tools. I'm very positive that many of my colleagues sitting here would agree. In many cases, the tools that we are using are outdated. The fundamental tool that these planners typically use is forecasting tool, and in some cases land use models as well. Well, these tools are, for the most part, relying on data, which is they are giving, in many cases, sketchy forecasts, which then engineers have to, or planners have to interpret to include the look at the collaboration process, which is highly encouraged. But one must remember that when we are talking about smart mobility, we are talking about deployment of smart systems. But when we look at developing countries, for the most part, and in some cases, developed nations as well, our regional plans are, they have a big void when it comes to smart mobility. So they keep talking about 20 years or 30 years horizon, we may be using electric cars, or we may be using autonomous vehicles, which will have different perspective when it comes. So we keep talking about corridor preservation, but little we think about how the public transport scape will change with the mobility as a service available. Is currently not represented in the regional planning processes. And so this has to be taken care of. Land use plan, in many cases, we assume that we know that 20 years horizon what will happen. But given the things are changing, we must accommodate smart mobility options that we are choosing for our future. That okay, use or this certain specific land use that we are hoping it will be there may not be needed. Imagine a large amount of workforce doing large interconnected central business district areas. We need to rethink about that process. Then any operational and ITS strategies are typically process or aggregate planning process. And when many of these ITS strategies can directly impact how much capital investment is. All of these are included in dilemma one. Now I will quickly, to begin with, we must reinvent the regional transport planning process, and by integrating it to the technologies of future. If you were thinking that I start discussing autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles, well, we could get there, and in some of my slides will talk about that. But these are the processes we need to reinvent and make sure that our planning processes are consistent with our future visions. If they are not, then 2030 horizon, or then we keep talking about some outdated modes or outdated technologies, yet we will never be able to transform to smart transformations. So that's why there has to be a connection between these two. Then dilemma for our conventional mobility practice is sketchy data. Imagine aggregate demand estimation tools or planning tools They for the most census, which I have great admiration for. I mean, this data is awesome, the census data, and could be utilized in many ways. But it comes with its own challenges. Um, then again, we are not talking data in terms of real-time data. We are not using big data elements. We are not uh, caching the power of big data that we have. In many cases, in developing countries, based on my experience working in many sectors, I have observed that in the data to begin with is not there. It's sitting on some registers or in books, or if even if it is in GIS files, they are fragmented, they are sporadic, and they are not archived together. So that's a major challenge. We are relying on something, we are trying to use something for our future planning purposes, transportation planning purposes, but we don't have much confidence in that. It's full of voids, full of inconsistencies. So data side is again an issue, and we are lacking in that. If we want to move towards smart mobility transformations, we must integrate, structure, and understand our data. Understanding the data is far more important than just utilizing it for the sake of it. So that's there again. These some of these planning processes use traffic analysis zones. I'm giving it as an example, but you could imagine that traffic analysis zones are in many cases static, and if there are some changes made, they are split with some assumption that this thing will happen. So these or that thing will happen, or this large employer will, that large employer will. But in essence, we are just playing a guessing game, not utilizing the power of data. So that needs to improve. So what we could do, harness the planning data, digitize it as much as possible, employ real-time database planning approaches to resolve baseline issues. So that is extremely important. Otherwise, if we don't have organized data structure, we cannot look at transforming to smart mobility based systems. The third dilemma of conventional practice is the half-baked processes. Now look at the traffic impact studies, for example. They just focus on, they are so disconnected. I'm not saying that their evaluations are not correct or their evaluations are not defensible. All I'm pointing towards is that these studies are disconnected. You are studying an impact of 10 intersections and how the improvements will play in there. But largely in many cases, those 10 intersections in those studies are disconnected from the region, and their regional impact is often not included. On top of that, the data is sketchy. On top, we could also add another layer of the outdated tool. It is not running in real time. It is using some base year data that was collected a few months ago, maybe a year ago, and then based on that, we are using some growth factors and applying. So this is reasonable. This works for now. But if we are thinking of heading towards smart mobility-based systems, we must transform to real-time data, relying on big data elements, and then using that power to make our decisions, planning decisions. Typically, advanced mobility interventions are not introduced in these corridor studies. For example, optimization of controls, or maybe adding a lane, or just conventional approaches are used. But seldom we look at the 10-year horizon or 15-year horizon, that what smart mobility changes are coming here and how those will impact this intersection. So in this way, that a lot of capital investment is wasted, where we get to a short-term solution, and then later on we realize that, 10 years or 15 years time frame, we will be doing certain things and this will not work, so let's reinvest. So this could be very easily avoided if we perceive the future changes for smart mobility perspective, and improve those elements which are needed in 10 years horizon ahead in time. So this is the most important one in my opinion, mismatch in priorities, where I have often seen regional transportation plans, which are so I have often seen that many municipalities or cities, they keep talking loud about their smart mobility initiatives and plans. But when you actually look at their regional transportation plans, they are they are free of it. They don't have any of the initiatives which typically these city officials are talking about. So the 30-year horizon long-range plan does not carry any autonomous vehicles, does not carry any connected vehicles infrastructure, connected infrastructure, does not carry any initiative to transform to big data structure. But when you look at the wish list, you will always find that, oh, we want to transform our city to smart city. We want to embrace connected vehicles. Well, we need to match our priorities. If we want to transform, we want to go in that direction, we need to bring those initiatives into our long-range planning process. We cannot reach there 20 years later and then realize that, oh, we have to make these initiatives and now we need additional funding. So the capital apportioning, allocation, finance allocation, these budget allocations must be made according to the generalized vision, smart mobility vision. So with this, this is an interesting, a never-ending vicious cycle depiction where you could see that we start with road widening, then the congestion goes away for a few months or maybe a year or two, then the land use changes, and then some under political pressures, the municipalities, they start looking into what's going on. They realize that the land use is changing heavily, and then congestion develops again, and then residents call for road widening again, and then road widens again, and this cycle continues on. If we introduce smart mobility elements in here, for instance, automated traffic management centers, connected corridors, and safety enforcement processes, we could save a lot of this hassle in road widening or corridor preservation. We could focus on those technologies which could not only save money, but also make the system efficient. So this is just an example of many cities in the developing countries which follow this routine of, oh, we need to improve our short-term plan, we need to improve our long-range plan. Every 5 years they improve it, they add some new projects for expansion. Little is given what transformations are needed for smart mobility. So that needs to happen, and this, if we want to include these advanced mobility systems into our in our long horizons, we need to bring them into our planning processes, regional transportation plans. So what are we learning from the, so far I've talked about conventional urban mobility planning. So what are the lessons? The lesson is that human interventions, we cannot make the processes automatic or robotic. I'm talking about planning processes. We must look into the human intervention perspective. We must intervene and try to envision what we are visioning for our future and try to bring into our planning processes. We need to look at the urban forms. Not necessarily every city will have CBD in future. As I explained to you that most people are working from home, and this trend is changing a lot. And then also the nature of how people work is changing fast. So we must rethink the communities and the urban form of our regions and how we could provide smart mobility-based facilities to our users. And the third one, which is rather very important, is envision the future. In many cases, most of these technologies are fragmented. They are scattered. Everybody is talking about connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, big data analytics, but little we understand that how to integrate them and how to prioritize them, which one comes first for us, what is best for our community, and do we really need to transform ourselves to having autonomous and connected vehicles, or do we need big data analytics first, or do we need automated data collection processes? So all of these need to be prioritized for each municipality, cities, or larger regions, and then we could move in that direction. Now I'm going to talk about urban mobility planning processes in general, for how we could use smart mobility based systems. This is important from the perspective of how these systems can be made efficient, rather than just going in each and every direction and then not finding the optimized solutions for the communities. Well, to begin with, I would like to give an example of Kodak and Nokia. These are great firms. I have great respect for them. I'm just giving them as an example because, admittedly, they also have recognized this and mentioned it many times, that they missed the boat in the beginning when it comes to certain technologies. For example, in case of photography, Kodak missed the boat when things were digital. They stick to in the first few decades, actually for 2 decades, they said no, we are gonna stick with the traditional photography. And later on, they realized that they have missed the boat because all of this, came for cell phones and how technology transformed. And now they are this game. This is an example how they did race change. They were left. Nokia is an example. At one point in time, they were leading the cell phone market, and then they had cell phones. But then, as the phones came, they were lagged behind, and then they were left behind, and they are now catching up fast, and they have great technology. But this is an example. And many social media-based apps, they have examples as well, that where they did not embrace new technologies and they were left behind. The reason I'm sharing with this with us is the need to realize that there is a certain time to catch these boats of smart mobility. And if you catch the boat, you are on board, and in 10, 20 years time horizon, you will be there. If you miss the boat, you will be behind. So that's why it has to be planned in a very good way. How the region will be transforming from conventional to smart urban mobility based systems. Here are the classic examples where we have manual cartography and we have geographic information system. So if we are still in a region, if you are using these systems, please transform to GIS-based systems. 4-step models, yes, they are awesome. They are a great tool to assess future, but you need to go to combined route choice and control models. You need to go to real-time baseline models. For that, you need to have before we used to have aerial imagery. I myself have used aerial imagery with big photographs and on paper, and then utilize them for technical analysis. But then now we have Google Maps and many other data sources. We need to utilize them. Household diary surveys, they are still great resource when it comes to trip making behavior and other things. But again, the issue is that we need to move on to technology, which in many examples, their smartphone and app-based solutions are there. Then storage on hard drives, we have cloud. Traffic enforcement by police, traffic enforcement and fines by smart cameras. We must transform to these gradually. It will not happen overnight. We have to transform systems gradually, bit by bit. And then collectively, if we have all of these systems, the municipalities or these cities, they will start realizing that gradually these are coming. example, flow data by tubes, radars, all of us did that. But now we have drones, video analytics. So utilize those. Then we have portable global positioning systems. We used to have those cards, but now smartphone based apps and built apps and many other technology. So these are just glimpses. These are just some examples, and not all, but some examples. So now we look into how mobility focus area, which smart mobility focus areas are of concern. The first one, of course, is smart and sensible mobility systems. We need to deploy them gradually and with testing. And later on, I will mention how the testing will work, how it's done. For example, traffic safety. This is often ignored and is not considered part of smart mobility. I have always emphasized that safety-centric, traffic safety-centric smart mobility systems get you there. If you have smart mobility systems and you are performing poorly on safety, you can rest assured that the smart mobility system will fail, because a large part of mobility is how safe and what quality you are offering to the drivers on the road. So that's I think important. The third one, capacity building for smart mobility technologies. These smart mobility is a snapshot in time when it comes to technologies. You know, the technologies are outpacing, the existing technology, and 2 months later there is a better technology there in the market. Which means that our workforce, professional workforce, must be trained on these challenges. I have noticed another thing in many countries that the professional engineers, they have very good experience in comes to conventional systems, but when it comes to smart mobility-based systems, they struggle. So this thing is an integral part of your transformation. Then research, innovation-based, thoughtful initiatives. This is where you could test these technologies instead of spending $1 billion, several $1 billion on a aggregate technology system that you buy. First, invest in testing and researching these solutions and see what works for your region, and then you go from there. Excuse me. So, what works for smart and sensible mobility systems? What's needed? We need sustainability and social equity for better urban fabric. We cannot have a connected corridor-based system, and yet we are making it inaccessible to a certain fabric of our society. So we have to make sure that whatever we are introducing has equity, social equity in it, and it is sustainable. And then intelligent transportation system integrated to traffic management and operation center. This is often lacking in developing countries, where the signal controllers are static. There's no operation center. There's no, if you have to make any changes or optimize the timings, you have to send somebody to the cabinet and fix it. All of these needs to be changed before we even think about connected vehicles. So then intermodal integration and TSP. If you are transit heavy, it should be integrated intermodal connectivity with TSP. And this is also, I've noticed that in many developing countries it is missing. Again, if we are dreaming about autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles, you cannot get there without these first three stages which I have mentioned. Mobility as a service, yes, make it an integral part of your mobility plans. If it is not there, your system suffer from accessibility options, from how to get from one mode to other mode, or how we can make integrated systems. Then shared ride solutions should be there. Connected and autonomous vehicle comes way ahead. It's way ahead of in many developing countries, because the very fundamental systems which are needed for these technologies are not there. For example, connected infrastructure is not there. So how do you work with these technologies, connected and autonomous vehicles? So in order to get there, we need to have that, have these initial smart systems first. Vehicle to everything, smart enforcement and use of AI. This is also part of the game where traffic safety enforcement should not be manual. In many developing countries, this is a manual process. Yes, I know that it is transforming, but it needs to transform fast. We need to have smart mobility, these cameras, action camera, and use of AI should be common to detect these. Virtual reality and augmented reality training programs for the first response system, big data analytics, and Internet of Things. I have already talked about how big data analytics is important, and different countries need to have in place before we even dream about anything like connected and autonomous vehicles. So I have already covered some of this. In most developing countries, there could be exceptions. I'm not saying all of them have this situation, but in most developing countries, we have sustainability and social equity. Yes, the planners are looking into it for the most part. We have ITS and management and operation centers. Yes, we are transforming fast. Many countries have already got that. Smart enforcement and use of AI. Well, we need still a lot of hard work on that. I think that in most countries it is manual, but there are some examples of developing countries where they have already started using these technologies. And intermodal integration, yes, it is also a sector where we still need to do a lot of work. And the rest of the list is same as I discussed before. We cannot think about these things unless we fix our fundamental systems, the above four that I have about. So if we fix these, then we could talk about, and maybe big data analytics is one, the last time, it could play before anything come to them. So if we are thinking of transforming, please first make the fundamental systems smart and sensible, and then we transform to other technologies. I will be trying to cut it short now because of time constraint, but traffic safety, for example, is another issue where we have where it affects the quality of life. Many developing countries do not fatality counts. There are inconsistencies because the data structure is not there. Serious injuries we don't know, and as a matter of fact, the issue with this is that there, even though no amount of money could pay for the loss of life, but still government agencies are directly spending a lot of capital on these two items: serious injuries and fatalities, through their hospitals, through their welfare systems. So in order to improve smart system. How smart emergency management system? If you have that in place, in many cases, many precious lives could be saved. And in current state of affairs, I know that this is something which most developing countries are lacking, and in some cases, developed countries as well. I will give you an example of Saudi Arabia, where we have critical traffic safety situation. We have 28 per 100,000 population fatalities, and now maybe it is 25 or 20, but it still is a high number. Serious injuries caused by RTA are among the highest per 100K. No cost could be equated to loss of life. We all know that. But Saudi Arabia spends around 25 to 30 billion Saudi riyal, roughly $10 billion annually, on treatment, rehabilitation, and welfare costs. And so that's why I'm saying that this, if you look at this cost, you could very easily link it to smart mobility based initiatives and say we could save on these costs if we invest on smart mobility based systems. And so this is another example of how the curve is going high. And even though we are in Saudi Arabia, we are transforming to smart mobility based systems, but we need to invest more on these life-saving enforcement systems where we could lower the number of deaths per 100,000 population due to road accidents. So for emergency management and for safety, what interventions could be taken? Sophisticated and integrated RTA, road traffic accident mortality data registry program. The developing countries could develop those programs for their provinces or states or jurisdictions, and then integrate them. Standard RTA injury evaluation scoring system should be in place. Stricter enforcement plan using smart camera technology should be in place. And establishment of level 1 trauma centers should be in place. Swift and well-connected emergency management systems should be in place. And I have mentioned these names on the side, right side, where you could, these institutions have been leaders in when it comes to development of emergency management systems, and you could hook up with them and get some guidelines on how to get there. When it comes to capacity building for smart mobility technologies, why it is needed? Because as I said, it is a snapshot in time, and our professionals, including myself, it's a learning, it's a new thing for me as well. So we all need to learn these new technologies. We all need to learn how to deal with this data. Do we really understand this big data? First question is that we need to understand this. So we need to train our workforce, professional engineers, on real-time traffic operations and management, systems and management systems, and real-time modeling and simulations, smart mobility recruitment deployment systems, integrated traffic safety enforcement, data integration, virtual reality-based technologies, safe driver awareness campaigns and programs. We need to develop those. Then, when it comes to public transportation, we need to have smart bus stops, one-stop mobility portal for users where they could buy tickets, they could route, they could develop their routing plan, they would know that where do I pick up my last mile service. All of those need to be integrated. And I know for the fact that in many cases in developing countries, these are not integrated. Intermodal transport should be integrated, and furthermore, mobility as a service and many other more concepts should be there. So these are the things we need to look at before we talk about connected systems. Then we have immediate VR, AR, and virtual reality and augmented reality and AI-based applications. We need to train our young ones on how to safely maneuver across the roads and seat belts and whatnot. On safety, we need to prepare our young generation on safety. So this is integral part of smart mobility. If someone thinks that smart mobility is only about connected autonomous vehicles and maybe connected systems, I think that's a flawed argument. We need to integrate safety as a core fundamental to our smart mobility transformation process. And then we need to have awareness campaign. An example is that traffic cost detection using video analytics, AI-based processes. We need to embrace these new processes. So I will, one of the last items is across the globe are going through this swift transformation when it comes to smart mobility, sustainability, and safety. But often we see that the countries make big announcements, but when as planners, as professionals, when we look at their planning processes, they are free of these initiatives which are needed to transform. So that's why I suggest that in many cases, hundreds of patents are there to brag about, but their commercial value is not there. We must capacity building process to ensure that our forces train. We must conduct cutting-edge applied research and see how these new technologies that we are importing will work. As I have explained earlier, that what works in Sweden not necessarily will work in Colombia or Brazil. So each country have their own parameters, and we need to have our own system, our own research centers to figure out if these systems will work thoroughly. We need to facilitate our stakeholders through the future policy debates where global experts are invited and they could share with them their experiences. Then develop partnerships with other cities to learn from their experiences. So some of the future smart mobility avenues to explore all of us with smart transportation infrastructure. This, of course, includes our favorite topic of connected and autonomous vehicles enabled infrastructure. But As I explained earlier in my presentation, that we need to get the fundamentals. We need to get fundamentals right. We need to make sure that our basic infrastructure is correct first, and then we go in that direction. Connected and autonomous vehicles are there. Electric vehicle and charging infrastructure is there. Autonomous freight transport management system is there, which is, I believe, that will be the most important aspect of autonomous vehicles. Smart public transit and tariff should be there. Smart lane management system should be there, including tolls and HOVs, how we deal with them, and how the new knowledge impact concept. Integrated and open transport data should be there. If your region does not have that, you could easily understand that you have a long ways to go to reach full transformation to smart mobility. Without an integrated data, it's not possible. Integrated accident mortality registry is important that you understand what is causing these fatalities and how you could fix them. And otherwise, how good a smart mobility system if you have 30 per 100,000 mortalities in road due to road accidents. Then system integration to mobility as a service is very important. Look, I'm not gonna reiterate what I've said earlier, and I assume that all of you are on the same page, and I understand that we all have shared the experiences and we all have these experiences as well. But I'm gonna say one thing which one of my friend, Dr. Sarah Williams from MIT, she said, and I have imprinted that in many of my presentations. She says that big data will not change the world unless it is collated and synthesized into tools that have a public benefit. So you have all the wealth of data in separate cabinets, segregated and fragmented and sporadic in different agencies. But if this data is not talking to each, data sets are not talking to each other, it's no use. So before we go to these buzzwords and these very advanced technologies, I have always opinion on this. I've aligned with this that we need to concentrate on fixing our systems, existing systems towards smart mobility. With that, I thank you very much. These are the references I used, and I thank you very much for your time. Thanks.